It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast Show. It's Expresso right here on SABC3. Now, as we continue to celebrate Women's Month, today we're tackling a topic that I think most of us tend to shy away from, but everyone will definitely experience this in their life. Well, I think so. That's why we have the doctor in the house. We're talking about menopause, and we're joined again by our resident Dr. Green, Darren Green. And of course, if you have a question for him with regards to this situation that we're going to be discussing, please feel free to give us a call.
You might be wondering why I am here. I think we have to know that as a responsible partner, as a husband, you have a role to play here as well. And I think that goes for every issue relating to women. And I've been loving the fact that we've been raising awareness about this, but it's also an opportunity for men just not to be useless, generally, during a time when I think women need support. So can you please just break it down for us? Talk to me like I'm an idiot.
Sure, knowledge is power.
Yeah, knowledge really is power. But what actually is menopause? Take us through that process.
So it's basically the transition from being fertile to not fertile. In other words, the ability to fall pregnant and produce eggs and house a pregnancy. So your body goes through changes as you approach, obviously, the average age is between 45 and 55, but that's by no means the do-all and end-all for everybody. We have people developing symptoms of the start of this period, which is called the climacterium. It's the climax, so to say, of your fertile life as it reaches its end. And what happens is you get what's called premature menopause, which can start as early as in your 30s as well. Wow. And it's all about estrogen and the different subtypes of estrogen that are involved from the time you're a teenager in puberty, developing secondary sexual characteristics and so forth, all the way through to producing the eggs, you know, looking after stimulating the growth of the eggs that need to be fertilized, you know, in the likelihood of falling pregnant, for example. But estrogen decreases as time goes on, and that process of estrogen depletion, basically, is what gives the rise to the symptoms of menopause.
So is it a fact then that all women are going to go through menopause in their lifetime?
All women will go through menopause, but not all women experience menopause equally. So, you know, the symptom complex is experienced by some women as really, really debilitating and life-changing, and there's obviously a lot of stigma around it when we talk about it in conversations. But not everyone has the same features, and also there's a lot you can do to prevent those symptoms by modifying certain things in your life early on.
We're certainly going to get into that, and all of this, you know, I know there is a myth that it starts at after 50, but you've said that it can start as early as 30. But all of this being said, the first thing that jumped out is that as much as we would see those external factors and physical factors, knowing the woman in my life, there would be a massive emotional attachment to going through that journey if you're letting go of that ability to be able to produce children. That must be one of the biggest effects.
You know, we often refer to females as being emotional beings, really more in touch with their emotions than males in generally, stereotyping. But if you look at the role of estrogen and the role that it actually plays in mood, in energy levels, etc., in alertness and concentration even, you can imagine what the effect of that is on behaviors, different behaviors in our lives, but also obviously on the emotional moods that we experience in our family setup and in our relationships.
Okay, well, we are going to continue this chat with Dr. Darren Green. And of course, I need to get into the fact that you said people are going to experience it differently.
Indeed.
Some more difficult, some less difficult. There are different things that you can use, of course, to lessen the symptoms.
Of course,
and I think a lot of people, especially if you are one of those women that are going through really tough menopausal symptoms right now, you want to stay tuned for that.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Thank you so much to everyone who has joined us on the lines. We've had a fantastic response to our discussion this morning talking about menopause. We've got Dr. Darren Green here, and we've got Liz on the line. A very good morning, Liz. How are you?
Liz.
I'm very well. How are you guys?
We are fantastic. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. Do you have a question or a comment for the doctor?
Yeah, I do have. I just wanted to know. I wanted to ask the doctor. I had my hysterectomy in 2003. And I just want to ask him, is it possible that I can, I'm 57, that I can still have what do you call it now?
Menopause?
The menopause. Sorry for that now.
No, a very, very good question.
Yeah, so she had a hysterectomy, which is essentially when we take out the uterus. So you can have a hysterectomy plus or minus an ovarectomy, where they take out the ovaries with that. Because remember that the ovaries continue producing hormones and are very important in that process, even for years afterwards. So it would depend on whether ovaries were removed as well. But certainly the symptoms at the age of 57, I mentioned the average time period for menopause is between 45 and 55. So at the age of 57, she could certainly still have symptoms of that estrogen withdrawing from her system, affecting different systems in the body. So yes.
Would it be more pronounced? Would it be less pronounced? What effect would that
So
hysterectomy have?
the issue obviously is if she had the hysterectomy in 2003, that's 15 years ago, her hormones obviously would have been depleted a lot quicker, and she would have had to have gone on to hormone replacement therapy. And not everyone is eligible for hormone replacement therapy. There are lots of pros and cons as to who can and can't use it. That's obviously having synthetic hormone that's normally produced by the ovaries now that you're ingesting and taking to help you with those symptoms through the period.
So the bottom line is she could still experience some of those symptoms.
Correct.
All right, Liz, thank you so much. Very, very interesting question. When we talk about those symptoms and a drop in estrogen, how does that exhibit?
Yeah, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, estrogen is so important, and there are three different subtypes. Secondary characteristics, sexual characteristics in puberty, but as in menopause specifically, they affect the skin in terms of dryness. You get a condition called atrophic vaginitis, where the pliability and elasticity of the skin is affected. That leads then obviously to an increased incidence of UTIs in older ladies. And then of course you have the other symptoms which involve the hot flushes, which everyone knows one of the most common symptoms are the hot flushes. And then, of course, the other things are mood, concentration issues, sleep issues, and those all play a massive role in your day-to-day functioning, both in the workplace and at home.
Now, I think if anyone has experienced someone that you love, like your mom or aunt, going through those hot
Or
flushes,
partner,
that is pretty hectic, hey? Like, I don't think anyone really understands what women go through with those.
They don't. You know, emotionally, I think men often are frustrated because they don't understand the condition. I think it helps so much to put it in the spotlight and actually explain to people what's happening. It's not a voluntary thing. Nobody willfully wants to have hot flushes. There are certain triggers that you can avoid, obviously, that we'll get into, but you know, we need to look at understanding the condition because the emotional journey is quite hectic. You can imagine the support that is required to help someone through that period, because it's not going to be there forever. That's the first thing. There's light at the end of that tunnel, and that's what's positive about it.
Okay. We've also got Dalveen from Joburg on the line this morning. Good morning, Dalveen. What is your question or comment for Dr. Darren Green?
Good morning, Leanne. I think the doctor just answered it. I wanted to know, does it ever stop? I've been going through it for 7 years, and it doesn't seem to be even lessening.
Thank you so much. I'm sure a lot of women can relate to that.
Yes, so it would depend what symptom complex she actually has or which symptoms. Some of them persist longer. I know hot flushes can sometimes persist in ladies quite late, even 10, 15 years down the line as well. And they have to learn coping mechanisms and things to avoid as to how to cope with that. But certainly, you know, depending on the symptom complex, a lot of their primary symptoms obviously disappear. So you don't get your menses anymore. As I mentioned, the skin issues, their ways of treating that. And then obviously moving forward in terms of energy levels, mood, sleeping pattern, all that will need to be helped. And often when we do then supplement the hormones that have been lost and withdrawn, you get rid of most of the symptoms, but not always all of them.
Oh, thank you so much. So many more questions rising already. If you have one, please weigh in. I'm very interested to know about the relationship to weight gain or weight loss in that area, maybe type 2 diabetes as well. So you can think on that. We're going to continue our discussion around menopause in a moment.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in, having a hugely interesting discussion with Dr. Darren Green. You really are the tome of all knowledge when it comes to these things. Thank you so much for breaking it down in a way that I can understand. We have got a host of great callers coming in as well. Andrew is on the line. Thank you for another gent joining us right now. Please, your comment or question for the doctor.
Good morning.
Morning, Andrew.
Morning. Your comment or question?
Yes, man. I just.
Andrew, could you turn down your TV in the background because we're hearing ourselves through your phone?
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Expresso team. How are you this morning?
Oh, very good. Thank you so much for joining the conversation as a guy as well. What's your comment or your question?
Oh, man, I would just like to know, Doc, that men, do they experience the same symptoms as women going through the same menopause thing?
Very good.
And How do we know when we experience these things?
Great
like a
question.
woman?
So the equivalent of menopause in males is what's called testosterone deficiency syndrome.
Menopause.
So as your testosterone levels decrease, it also affects the various systems in your body, from things like mood, energy levels, your muscle mass, your build, your physique, even your shape. And that results obviously in changes in your libido as well as you get older. So very interesting for males also to recognize those symptoms early, because they might have depleted or their levels of testosterone might be too low. So yeah, there is an equivalent in males, obviously, but it's definitely noticeable.
And he was asking, in terms of treatment, would that then be
That-
turned
yeah,
to testosterone?
You can supplement testosterone when you've got proof that it's obviously the levels are too low, to get the levels up to normal, not to be anabolic and build to a degree where you have secondary side effects systemically.
Sylvester Stallone, you know. Earlier I mentioned, thank you very much, great question, thank you, Andrew. I mentioned earlier a possibility of a weight gain attachment or a weight loss. I would imagine something that women would be very, very wary of.
Of course, and obviously it's interesting, women that are of a good weight and manage their weight well and are not overweight tend to have a much better transition through the period of menopause than women that are obese.
Okay.
And the reasons for that are, obviously, there's a lot of that you can do about stress reduction, cortisol levels, thyroid levels, etc. So menopause and estrogen withdrawal certainly does have an effect on metabolism. It also has an effect, obviously, on things like your appetite, your self-image, with the mood and energy that's depleted, and also the decreased libido in terms of your activity levels.
Okay. Well, you were talking about the fact earlier on, you were saying that different women experience the symptoms differently.
Yes,
You
yes.
said that weight gain was also a big factor in this. I wanted to know from you, what causes these different things, and how does one even begin to approach it? Does it, do you need to employ a healthy lifestyle, exercise,
Good question.
eating well? Because I'm sure that's where it starts as well, right?
Yeah, so the preventative things that you can do, or the ways that are non-medicinal of treating menopause, are very important. Your lifestyle management is very, very important. So from what you're putting in terms of your diet, we alluded earlier on to eating a lot of omegas, zinc, looking after that component of your diet, looking at your weight management, looking at your stress reduction techniques. The amount that you exercise certainly has an effect directly on your hormone profile and also your weight management. And then, of course, hormone replacement therapy. Now, the big thing about hormone replacement therapy is that certain cancers they respond to estrogen therapy.
Yeah.
So that's why everyone can't use the oral contraceptive pill. Everybody can't use hormone replacement therapy, especially if there's a high incidence of breast and ovarian cancer in families. Those are the women that must be very careful.
Yeah.
A lot of people opt for natural supplementation, natural products that contain plant estrogens. Simple example of that would be something like soy. So soy proteins in soy, red clover, that kind of thing. But there, you don't know amounts in terms of regulating how much you're taking, how little you're taking, and what long-term side effects are. So certainly a lot to digest in terms of lifestyle management and preventative factors.
I think in our next segment, we're going to get into what we as gentlemen in that dynamic can do to offer support. 021 430 9881 is the number to dial. We've still got the doc in the house. You've got any questions or maybe some advice for us gentlemen especially. We'll continue in a moment.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
So we've got one last opportunity for you to weigh in with any questions relating to menopause this morning. 021 430 9881. I'm so glad I can remember that number. Finally, it's taken about 3 weeks. Doc, you've been fantastic this morning, and I hope we've kind of removed some of that stigma around what should be a subject we can all talk about. I love the fact that you guys are phoning in as well. We've got Elsabe on the line right now, joining us all the way from Pretoria. Very good morning, Elsabe.
Good morning to you all.
Thank you so much for connecting with us. What is your comment or your question?
Doctor, I just want to find out, if you use estrogen, for how long must you use it for?
Good question. So
Great,
if you're using replacement therapy, it would be dependent on your symptom complex. And when you're feeling, obviously, that things are controlled and you move through that period, which I said is the climacterium. So when you start feeling a change in and that you're coping completely, one would then look at whether you can start decreasing and coming off the supplementation as such. Remember that the longer you use any form of medication, including hormone replacement therapy, obviously the more likely you are to develop side effects. So be aware of that. but also it's a comorbid decision. We've got to look at things like osteoporosis, which is facilitated by a lack of estrogen. If you have bad osteoporosis, you might not stop the therapy, you might continue longer. So one needs to consider the picture as a whole and comorbid conditions as well in making that decision.
But it is ultimately a decision that you make. No one else is going to make that
Correct.
for you. You've got to take control of that. But also be wonderful question. Thank you so much. Yeah.
You had a great question about support in the family structure.
What
How-
can we do as men? I think
Yeah.
we are very much, when those symptoms are getting, I think, too hard to deal with, men will often be the tipping point, that breaking point in doing something completely stupid. What can we do to
Lovely
help?
picture, by the way.
That's so cute.
Yeah, very cool.
Understanding the condition leads obviously to, you need to take action. In other words, you need to let them feel your support. It's no use having the intention and thinking about sympathy and empathy. You have to display that. Ways of displaying that would be obviously opening the conversation, making sure the person understands that the menopause and the person during the menopause doesn't define that person. You know, you've got to remind them who they are. You've got to remind them who the person was that you fell in love with and the person that you're going to spend your retirement with, for example, as well. Along with that, encourage them obviously with the lifestyle modification things that I mentioned.
Yeah,
It
but
requires a
don't
bit of
be
energy.
stupid about it, and don't go and offer solutions that you know nothing about. Be supportive and empathetic. I love that. Yeah.
We've also got a call, Gail from Cape Town on the line. Good morning, Gail. What's your question or comment for Dr. Darren?
Good morning. My comment this morning is that I think they should be taken further because men don't really understand at times, and sometimes they get to a point in the marriage where they feel they need a replacement. So if men could be educated about this more, take this further. As we have a Women's Month, we celebrate women. There's a lot of things going for women. Let's do something for the men and educate them out there. Very great program. I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you so much,
Well, hopefully
Gail.
this has helped to address that stigma in just a small way. Make it a conversation, but try to be supportive as a male and leave it there.
And I love that the two men in the situation are outnumbering the girl. And of course, like she said, it's all about knowledge. Knowledge is power. And when you know better, you can do better.
Correct.
So let's continue to educate all of our men and all South Africans with regards to the subject.
I think like all of these opportunities, and I'm going to call it an opportunity, it's a chance for you, women who are ultimately very underappreciated by everyone, yes, in society, but by yourself most of all, an opportunity to make yourself the center of your own life again. Work on yourself, be happy with yourself, and have an opportunity to open the lines of conversation. And as always, the doctor will be here to support you through it. Doc, thank you so much for joining us. What an interesting conversation this morning. Thank you to all of our callers as well.